The Unsinkable Mummy Adler is the 13th episode of the first season of Will and Grace. This is directed by the wonderful James Burrows and features the amazing Debbie Reynolds. I absolutely love her, and I'm actually reviewing Will and Grace in batches of 4 episodes, give or take. But I wanted to take the time to talk about this one on its own because I am quite obsessed with Debbie Reynolds, and I was really looking forward to this. There's also one moment in this episode that's so perfect, and I think it's a blooper that they kept in. And if it is, the way it unfolded or the way it concluded, absolutely exquisite. I'd love to know if anybody can confirm that it wasn't meant to happen, but I'll talk about that at the very, very end. There will be spoilers from now as I go through the episode, and it starts off quite appropriately with a discussion about Star Wars. Appropriate, in case you're unaware, Debbie Reynolds is Carrie Fisher's mother. And they then get a phone message from Bobbi Adler. This is, of course, Grace's mother, and she's coming to visit the Grand Apple, as she calls it. And she has this wonderful musical entrance. She is a larger-than-life character, and it's very clear that she's quite critical of Grace. And Grace is bracing herself for this. But despite that, and despite us knowing before we even meet her that she's quite a critical individual, she is absolutely wonderful and so likeable. She sings her way into Grace's office and Karen joins in, and it's an absolute delight. And then she suggests that Grace marries Will because it could be a really good setup between both of them, even though she knows Will is gay. And Jack then comes in and presents his butt, and once Jack and Karen are alone in the office, Karen confides in Jack that she thinks she might be pregnant, and we'll come back to that later on. We then cut to the next scene where they're all there together playing poker, and Bobbi Adler she completely steals the attention. I know it's probably partly biased because I am in love with Debbie Reynolds, but she's just so fabulous, a brilliantly written character with a wonderful performance, and they're talking about marrying each other. And the closing remark for this scene, even though it's very brief and we immediately cut to the next scene, you could feel the tension changing when Will says flippantly, "Even if I was straight, I wouldn't marry Grace." That's not a nice thing to say about anybody, and I don't think he meant it nastily. I don't think he was really thinking about what he was saying, and because it's not as if he would ever marry Grace anyway, he probably thought it's just a passing comment. But we cut immediately to the next scene, and Bobbi and Grace are at a restaurant having dinner, and yet again, Bobbi gives a wonderful performance, flirts with the waiter, which was quite nice, and Grace is wondering what Will meant by that. What did he mean? And I'll be honest, I don't think she's overreacting. I think she does in this scene actually point out that maybe she was overreacting. But if somebody said to me, "Even if I wasn't gay, I wouldn't marry you," or something that would make me feel quite hurt, I don't think it would be unreasonable to want to know what they meant by that, or why they felt so strongly that they had to put it into words. Before Will arrives, Grace tells her mother that her mother just always has to be the star, which is an absolute joy. And then Will arrives, and Grace presses him for information, and he tells her, kind of reluctantly, but she did ask, he tells her it's the way you are with your boyfriends, and he told her that you always need to be the star in your relationship, slightly mirroring the conversation Grace has just had with her mother. And there we have Grace worrying that she's turning into her mother. We're then with Karen and Jack, and their movements in this episode are beautiful, particularly when they stand up in unison, walk towards the pea sticks. It's just beautifully executed, and they have taken the pregnancy tests, both of them, because why not? Obviously, nothing on Jack's, nothing on Karen's either, but the way, and I think I'm not reading this correctly, but the way Karen barely looked at it and just very quickly said, "Nothing on mine either," it kind of made me think there was something on there. And that actually she is pregnant, but she's denying it. She didn't want to take the test anyway, so it's not as if it's something she wants to acknowledge. But I could be just reading into that where it's not there. Maybe there wasn't anything on it and she just brushed it aside. I don't know, but certainly it's left me a little bit curious. And just as Jack leaves the room, he gives her a hug and tells her he loves her, and it was just the sweetest moment. It was absolutely beautiful. We're then back in the apartment, and Grace is looking through all of her diaries. She has those diaries that have those really thick, fuzzy covers. And that just made me so nostalgic because I loved those. I'm a 90s child and I loved those fuzzy diaries. Absolutely adorable. And Grace is reading out these diary entries of examples of when she was in relationships, when she was younger, of course, and where, yeah, it definitely seemed like she was more focused on being the star in the relationship. And she realizes she's turning into her mother. And then her mother comes home and she says all of the right things. And yes, she has been critical of Grace up until this point, but she does ultimately say the right things and I guess makes Grace feel better about herself. I think it'll take more than just a couple of words from her mother to really boost her esteem again, but I think it's a step in the right direction. And then Will comes in and Bobbi scolds him because he doesn't want to marry Grace. And it was a lovely moment. And then while singing The Lady is a Tramp, Bobbi leaves. And this is where the potential blooper, I'm so convinced it's a blooper. If it wasn't, it would have taken many takes to get this because as she leaves, her scarf or shrug or whatever it is she's wearing gets trapped in the door. And Eric McCormack's face is really saying, I can't laugh out loud at this, but this is really funny. And it just looks natural, but it looks like a blooper, if that makes sense. And I'm just so convinced that it wasn't meant to happen. And Debbie handled it, if it's a blooper, so beautifully. We get a pause of maybe 10 seconds at the most, and Bobbi opens the door, grabs her scarf or whatever it was, and just shuts the door and presumably goes off on her way. And it was just so perfectly executed. But if it wasn't a blooper, it just looked so natural. And I can't imagine how many takes it would have taken to get it trapped in the door just so swiftly and so smoothly and effortlessly. So I'm praising it for one of two reasons. Either it was planned and it was beautifully executed, or it was a blooper and it was beautifully handled by all involved. So either way, it was a beautiful way to end the scene, and there was definitely this diva quality of the way Bobbi just opened the door, grabbed it, and kind of slammed, she didn't slam the door, but definitely shut it behind her again with some force. And you can imagine her walking off, waltzing off down the corridor. And it was perfect. It was absolutely fantastic. And as I said, I wanted to discuss this episode on its own because I had a feeling I'd have a lot to say about Debbie Reynolds, about the character of Bobbi. And I don't know if they wrote this with Debbie in mind, but certainly I would believe it because the character is just perfect for her. And I love her, and it was just absolutely brilliant. The reason I've been reviewing Will and Grace in batches now, I used to review each episode individually, and then I decided to review it in batches because I'm not in love with it, which I'm kind of disappointed by because I love James Burrows, worship the ground James Burrows walks on, but I have heard that it gets better after the first season. Unfortunately, in the UK, at the time of speaking, it's not available to stream anywhere for free. I had to buy season 1. I bought it twice because I bought the box set secondhand and some of the discs were broken, so I had to then buy the first season on Prime, which was a bit irritating. At this stage, I don't know if I want to buy season 2, but I still have quite a bit of season 1 to go, so I will wait until we get to the end and then I'll see, because I have heard that it does get better, which is not unusual. There are plenty of sitcoms that take a lot of time to get going, and maybe I'll be in love with it by the end. We will see, but for now, I'm pleased that I decided to watch and review The Unsinkable Mommy Adler. Oh, the title as well, in case you're unaware. The Unsinkable Mommy Adler comes from The Unsinkable Molly Brown, which is a Debbie Reynolds film, and obviously that makes perfect sense as a title anyway. So I absolutely love the character. The episode works really well. I'm so glad that I decided to watch this and review it on its own because I love Debbie Reynolds. She was fabulous as Bobbi Adler. I don't know if she's in it again. Maybe that will encourage me to watch more of it if she is. But for now, I can say that this episode was as fabulous as I expected it to be. That final scene, the final few seconds, somebody please confirm if it was a blooper that they kept in or if it was executed perfectly as written in the script. Either way, whatever it was wonderful. Debbie Reynolds was wonderful. The Unsinkable Mommy Adler was a pretty brilliant episode of Will and Grace.